Welcome back to episode 46 of the Grappling Growth podcast with me, Joe Testori. On today's podcast, I was joined by Sol Hyde. He is a digital creator and the founder of the Free Thinkers Club, a community which is empowering and helping people quit their job and make money online doing what they feel passionate about. I came across Sol about a month ago and I was inspired, invigorated by this guy. He is a really cool guy who just lives life on his terms. And I think anyone who is in a place where they're not enjoying their job or they want to be doing more, they can actually really focus on taking inspiration from what he does and just take compass of their life. So if you want to tune into this podcast, thank you for your time and subscribe.
As entrepreneurs, we all experience challenges in our business journey. I'm Joe Testori, and the Grappling Growth podcast is my attempt at documenting my entrepreneurial journey while building my brands. I sit down with fellow entrepreneurs, understanding how they grapple with growth. I hope you find value and enjoy.
So it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. How are you doing today?
Very well. Feeling pretty cold while being in London, but yeah, apart from that, all is good. How's things with you, mate?
All temporary, yeah, good on mine. So what does growth look like to you?
Growth for me is realizing that there's something in your life, or realizing that there's something that you believe or do that is not where you want it to be, changing it and implementing it into your life.
Wow, I've never had the answer before, but I'm going to flip that to you. What if you're at the place where you want to be at in life? You've hit the quote unquote goals. I know you're not at that place yet, but what do you think it looked like to you there?
So I think the whole fun part about what I think the journey I've been through in the last few months is that I've realized that it's very unlikely you'll ever be at the place where you want to be, because as soon as you get to the place that you thought you wanted to be at, as soon as you get to the place that you wanted to be at 2 months ago, then when you get to that point, your sights will already be 2 months in advance. So from me, I could say like 2 months ago, all I wanted to do was monetize my business, have revenue coming through the door. I've now hit that. And I remember hitting my fourth client signed, and I was like, this is unbelievable. Like first, second, third, fourth. And then I signed my fifth client, and immediately I jumped off the call and I was like, okay, next job. And I was like, that is ridiculous how all I could think about was sign those clients. And it took me 5 clients to get to the point where I was like, okay, next job. And I think that's really interesting with the point in life that you can be at, where you can be like, okay, I want to get to this point. And then as soon as you get there, it's like thoughts to the future. So growth, I think, means always thinking where you can go in the future and where you can improve where you are right now. And that point is always going to be in the future because of the nature of the human mind and the goal setting that we do.
Mm-hmm. And I'm quite intrigued. Why do you think it was the fifth client that you hit that you then closed that laptop and then thought, now what's next?
I think it was just the case that the feeling had worn off. Like I needed to prove to myself that I could earn money and that people would actually pay me money. Like I was providing enough value that people would give me money. And I don't know why it was maybe the fifth or the fourth. I think maybe you come up with excuses for the first 2 or 3. One of them is then, this was obvious because I'd set this up months ago. But I remember, like, I think the fifth was enough. It was like, okay, 4 people have already paid me. The fifth one was like, okay, this is just routine now. I was kind of into the clockwork of it. And then, yeah, after that, I remember just catching myself being like, why am I not unbelievably happy about this? And then, yeah, it was, okay, next job. It's interesting change that we go through as humans.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. I think there's so many feelings that you have when you kind of prove it externally, when you think, whatever you're thinking and then what you actually do connects and you think, wow, this is actually happening. And I think us as entrepreneurs, we often have those moments where the first win, and I've got a photo where I closed one of my first clients, and this was in person, and I've got a photo. This is actually in Clapham, just outside the Old Town, but I've got the contract in my hand, just smiling, and that was for a £2,000 a month client, which actually went tits up in the end. That was just a crazy story in and of itself. But that feeling, and when I compare it to stuff that I do now, it's like, yeah, that's nice. You become quite nonchalant towards it. You become quite numb, not numb, I don't want to say that, but I guess you understand it's part of the job. And when it first initially happens, it's a case of you're proving to yourself you've done what you said you want to do, and then eventually it's like, well, kind of like the Roy Keane-ness. It's like, it's his job, mate, isn't it?
Yeah. But I think that's so interesting. It's like you're like, okay, this is what I do now. This is how it works. And I think it's so, and that's why I like even brought that story up, because I really noticed it, because I always said to myself that it's about enjoying the journey, which is the most cliche classic quote of all time. But it's so true, because I know the amount of people who are ridiculous success compared to me, and they've lost the touch of like enjoying what they're doing, and it's like why did I get into this in the first place? It was to have certain things and have freedom and have money and have choice and ownership over what I wanted to do, and I've made it my mission to make sure I never ever forget that, no matter if I'm making $1 a week or if I'm making $100 a week. Like, I don't care either way. It's like to enjoy what I'm doing and to never forget that. So I now celebrate every client again, because I know that like I never want to get to that feeling where I'm just taking things for granted.
And day to day, what would you say you enjoy the most?
I love making videos. Like, I do just love sitting down and chatting and having my mic with me and conveying ideas. I love, another thing is I love interacting with people. Like, the amazing thing about this social media thing is me and you are like sat on a podcast chatting here. Like, that's so cool to me. And we're very like-minded people on other sides of the world. And the DMs that I get from people and the like small impact that I can make on people's lives, like, sounds so classic to say, but like, even just one of my clients right now, like, I've secured him his first client, and he can actually believe the fact that he might be able to move out of his parents' house and move into London, which he's always wanted. And I'm like, even if that's one impact that I have, if that's the only thing that happens, like, to me, that felt 1,000 times better than the whole 2 years that I spent in corporate. So yeah, that's, to me, the day-to-day stuff is having that impact, filming those videos. And then lastly, like, just having complete control over what I want to do. Like, I'm working much harder than my corporate job, but at the same time, I could literally shut my laptop, not now, but after the podcast, and then I could go for a walk, or I could work for another 3 hours. And I love that freedom aspect part. And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to be where I am now.
We just before we went live, we spoke about work or a job versus doing your own thing. And the way how I positioned it, and this is the mental model that I used, was just kind of the payoffs you can achieve from a job. Quite often with jobs, there's substantially lower ceilings than there are with what you pursue by yourself, and naturally that just comes down to the risk. As an entrepreneur, as a business owner, you're risking a lot more typically. But it's for me, and I mentioned to you yesterday was Sunday, I was in a coffee shop until it closed at 8:10 at night working, and I could never imagine doing that for a corporate company before, because for me even if things don't work out, it just feels that you're just pushing something, you're testing something, and the excitement of an idea that ideates into something on paper, and you put it out there to people and you see it manifest, it just feels more impactful, especially when you work one-to-one with people. And yeah, you're maximizing shareholders' profit, but then when you're turning around and a guy says to you that he's able to move out his family home, or he wants to do that, he's getting closer to that goal of moving to London, you go to bed feeling just completely different.
100%. It's that, like, I can't even, it frustrated me when I was in the corporate that people wanted to only just serve a shareholder or serve a boss, and that was the only thing they were interested in. And it was when there was conversations, like, I think this is one of my favorite conversations, is that I think most people have the idea of work completely wrong, which is work being the definition of I go, I earn money, and then everything else I do in my life is what I enjoy, and maybe they get a bit of enjoyment from their job. But for me, work is like your purpose and your fulfillment, and I don't work and not work. I just live my life, and the life that I want to live is sitting on podcasts like this, is filming videos, is helping people in the way that I'm doing. And for some people, they might call opening a laptop and editing a video work, but for me, it's just like my life, and I'm happy to work 100 hours a week doing it because that's what I enjoy doing, and therefore, if I enjoy doing it and it's my life, it's perfect.
But just to play devil's advocate there, because I think at times when you start online running your business, it's like the honeymoon period in a relationship. You're just infatuated. All you want to do is that. And this is, I think, the curse of a lot of entrepreneurs, business people, is that I saw this photo online. It was a guy in front of his computer, and then it had his mind bubble there of him thinking about being on a beach. And then it had the reverse of him on the beach thinking about work. I think there's a bit of a paradox that occurs further down the line, whereby everything that you were enjoying at the start, it kind of fizzles out, and then eventually it gets to a point of, I feel chained to this business and I have to overcommit, because at the end of the day, we do want to live a life of freedom and abundance.
I love that. And I think firstly, you're a lot more experienced in the space than I am. So I obviously really respect that view. And I think that everything I'm doing, because I have heard that before, is to make sure that I don't ever feel like when I'm not enjoying something, I make a mental note of that and work out how I can change that. So for example, I am like really pumping out YouTube videos right now, and I found myself still loving making the YouTube videos, but the editing was just like became a lot less enjoyable. And I was like, okay, how can I change that? So I then got an editor, and now I'm like, okay, I really enjoy that process again. And I think there is a part where you become chained to a business. There is a part where you feel that the tasks you once loved become less enjoyable. But I think there's always a way to make things enjoyable, and there's always a way to change things to make them at least internally enjoyable. Like if you can gamify things, if you can create little rewards for things at the end. And I know that might wear off at some point, but every time that's come to me in the last year and a half of being in this space, I've managed to work out a way to make sure that I'm still enjoying things. And it always does boil down for me. I've never stopped enjoying making the videos, and I've never stopped enjoying those conversations with people. And as long as I make sure that they make up a good proportion of my day, all of the other tasks really for me become doable.
Mm-hmm. And you just had me think of a person right now who's quite in the British limelight, but it's Marcus Rashford. And I'm a Manchester United fan. Are you a football fan?
Yeah, I'm a Spurs fan for my sins.
Well, you beat us a few weeks ago, so there you go.
It's about the only team we have beaten recently.
Okay, you can leave that one out. Well, you did beat City as well, 4-0. But looking at Rashford and just, you think of it, Rashford's 27 years old. And if you asked a 7-year-old or a 17-year-old Rashford, in 10, 20 years' time, you're going to be the highest paid player at Manchester United, he would probably have said to you, I will give everything to this club. And now, and I love Rashford, but I do feel like he's come to the end of his journey. At times, as a football fan, I sit there and think, how on earth has this young lad from just the outskirts of Manchester got to the point where he doesn't want to play for his boyhood club? If someone said to me right now, which obviously I had a knee injury, so it hasn't worked out, but you could earn 10k a week playing for Manchester United, but you have to run 10 kilometers every single game. I'll be like, all right, well done, that's easy.
It's crazy. So interesting. Sorry, yeah, like it's so interesting. So where do you think that, like, so the question is like, where do you lose that? Like, what's the part of the journey where you lose that? And obviously I have no idea about Marcus Rashford. I think all we can control is how we feel, and it comes back to what I was saying about that client, is just actually taking mental notes and checking yourself at every point, and to actually like practice, like I guess practice gratitude of where you are. Like I've massively implemented gratitude in my life because I used to think it was ridiculous, and now I'm like, actually it's so important to always take stock of where you are. So I'm not saying that Marcus Rashford needs to get out his journal and start practicing gratitude, but like that would be my solution to that, and exactly how I'm working out and making sure that every position I'm in, I always compare that to where I was in the past and never let myself forget that I was in that point. And even in the last 3 months, the journey that I've been on and the difference that I've made has been so much that I'm like, I'm taking stock and I'm aware of how grateful I am to be where I am now. So yeah, if that answers the question, I think is to just be so present and grateful of where you are, that hopefully helps that.
I think what I love about this podcast is a lot of the time it's just I try to make it as conversational as possible, where it's not me always trying to point a question to you as the guest, because then it feels to an extent like an interview or interrogation. I really just want this to be a platform for people to sit down and just talk to each other, and then other people can listen in. One thing that I probably dismissed when I was younger is things that are going on externally and mental health. And you as a Spurs fan, you probably listened to Dele Alli, it was about a year ago, where he sat down. And it's so prevalent whereby you think of a high performance athlete, a footballer, as though he's this robot and he's a vessel where all he does is live and sleep football. But there's so many things that go on, whether it's physical health, mental health, and we see phenomenal players such as Ronaldo, as in the Brazilian Ronaldo, or Michael Owen, where they suffer an excruciating, career-changing knee injury when they're really young or whenever, and that just changes their complete career. But there's so many other things that happen. If things happen outside of our control, and I always think of kind of the Stoic philosophy of what you can control, what you can't control, and we rarely seldom think that there's so many other things that go on in people's lives that just throw it into the abyss. And I've had periods in business where personal life isn't great, or my physical health isn't there. I notably 2023 was a really challenging year for myself, just physically. I had a back injury, but that overlaid so much so into business. And you would never think, oh, well, I've got this problem here, I'm not going to be successful in business, or I'm not going to turn up. But it's so prevalent. And I always think, and this is one thing that I say to my coaching clients and just in general, is if the internal is not looked after, then it is near enough impossible to look after the external. So for you, you mentioned journaling and displaying gratitude. Are there any other things that you do on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis that helps keep your internal in check?
It's an amazing question, because I've had a real mixed relationship with self-development stuff.
How so?
I went through this period that I think a lot of entrepreneurs have, where you get into the journaling, you get into the meditation, you get into the goal setting, and I really don't knock it at all. And even the kind of like really religious working out and that sort of thing. And if I'm honest with you, I'm not sure where I stand on it, because I used to journal every morning, and I used to meditate loads. And I started realizing that what was my goal? My goal was to improve my business, but feel good while I was doing it. And I was overdoing the self-development and actually underdoing the business part, because I was spending so much time on the self-development stuff. And I think there's a real balance to strike where you do both. So to answer your question directly, I found consistent exercise every morning is enough of a meditative process for me to feel that gets me in the right space and gets me in the headspace to do things. Occasionally I'll do meditation like itself, and I'll kind of do deep breathing, but in general, exercise is the biggest thing for me. And then keeping myself in check. Like, I think nutrition I found is an absolute game changer as well for me. Like changing my diet has been amazing. It gives me so many more hours back in the day. It makes
What does your diet look like right now?
Like almost no carbs, very high protein and very high fat. So like smashing the eggs, the avo, the steaks. And I never thought that would have a big effect on me, but it really, really has. impacted me as an entrepreneur. And I go back to days where I'd have a big pasta and chicken at lunchtime, and like it knocked me out for 3 hours. And like that, I think it's a personal thing, but that I can't do that now, because I can't lose 3 hours in my day of feeling like a slob. So yeah, I'm interested, but like, yeah, keen to hear, what's your diet look like? Have you found similar things?
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, I was a very fat kid growing up. So
Yeah,
if someone put an apple versus a chocolate bar in front of me, I always would have gone for the chocolate bar. And I guess that comes down to a lack of knowledge and education at the time. But I remember this was about 6, 7 years ago now. I was driving on the motorway, stopped off at a service station, had a KFC meal, and I just remember just being in the car driving, just thinking, I feel lethargic. I do not feel great.
yeah,
And don't get me wrong, after a night out or here and there, I have the odd
sure.
cheat meal, but exactly to what you said, it's about protecting your energy, knowing what inputs you're putting into your body. It's kind of like the classic analogy of putting fuel into a car. You don't put diesel into unleaded petrol car. You just fill it up with petrol. And for me, I won't eat my first meal until about 12, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So I guess intermittent fasting. And that just works for me. And I will probably go through 2 coffees, pretty much black coffees with a bit of milk or a little bit of a cappuccino. And that'll be enough for me. And maybe just a banana to kind of subside. But I've realized that I don't need to eat if I don't feel hungry. And I think there was this thing, and there's this thing with a lot of people, is that I guess you always used to eat before school, but typically when you'd eat before school, it'd probably be cereal and you just scoff it quickly, head out the
Yeah,
door. So I won't eat until the early afternoon, but exactly to what you said, you're quite protective with your meals. And if you have something too dense, then it takes up so much energy that the 2, 3 hours after work, or sorry, after the meal when you're back into work, it just feels like you're out for the count. But I'll go for 2 meals a day. Probably lunch is the biggest meal of the day, just because that gives me enough fuel, and then a nice dinner, but quite high protein based, similar to you as to what you said. I try to lean away from pasta. I find pasta's quite heavy. I do like rice, and I think that gives me a good balance there. But I want to take back to a point you mentioned about journaling and what works for you, what works for other people. I think, sorry, Alexa's talking to me. Seriously, sorry. Really good point that you made. And this is some context that I see online, which I massively disagree with, that each to their own. For you, you've realized that focusing on self-development does not work for you. And that's great that you've understood that. And you know that exercise in the morning is amazing. I see some content online that says, fuck therapy, fuck this. And I just think, no, because there's a place for everything for everyone. And
sure.
if you feel great after having a steak and eggs for lunch, but someone really wants rice and chicken and broccoli, just as something basic, then that's fine. And that's why at restaurants you have menus and there's options. And I really try to adopt a process of do what works for you until you get to a certain point. And I didn't do this before. I would continuously do something and I'd probably see diminishing returns that wasn't actually aiding my life and my benefits. So, talking about self development and personal growth, what are your top 3 business book recommendations?
Great question. Great question. So the first two roll off the tongue very, very quickly, which is The 4 Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. And then the second one is The Almanac of Naval Ravikant.
Fantastic book.
I probably read those two books like weekly, like to just go through different chapters on them. I think they are transformational in terms of the way they shaped how I think about life. Tim Ferriss is one because of the fact that it made me realize that you don't have to work 100-hour weeks and you can design your life to the way you want. And then Naval Ravikant's made me really understand like actually what leverage was and what wealth really meant. So those are the two best books. And then I'm going to throw in a third one, which actually really helped me in learning how to quit my job, which is The Psychology of Money. And that was
Great book as
really
well.
great because I I always was a big spender. How much ever money I'd have in my bank account, I'd just spend it. And it made me realize the importance of saving in many aspects. But one of the biggest one was like, you never know when you're going to need it. And I read that book, and 6 months later, I just knew that I had to quit my job. It was just the right moment. Everything aligned. And because I'd been saving for saving's sake, I had enough parachute to be able to actually quit my job and feel stable and not be too worried about it. And that was all because of that book. So yeah, they'd be my three.
And I would also throw the Almanac of Naval Ravikant in my top three myself, and that was one of the most transformational books and the way how I view my business today. What components of leverage do you really, really focus on in your business today?
So I loved the phrase that Naval said, that you really want to get to a point where you're either building or you're selling. And if you can do both, you're killing it. Unfortunately, I've yet to work out how to code, so I'm kind of focused on the selling part. And one of the highest forms of leverage that he spoke about is kind of social following, a social, like
Content.
basically a personal brand. And that is exactly what we do, because you see people like Imran Gadzi, you see people like Alex Hormozi, and they make their money not necessarily off the value that they provide, even though they do provide good value, but the vast personal brand and trust and authority that they've built out with people. And within the business, within myself, I am doing everything I can to elevate my personal brand. And then within the business that I help other people with their personal brands, I am giving them that leverage as well.
Mm-hmm. He's got a really fascinating concept, which I've spoken about on multiple videos before. Because of the new modern era of leverage, do you remember the concept?
Mm-hmm.
And I love how it's a pyramid, and at the bottom, and this is what we were talking about earlier, is that the focus that I had on my business when I initially started was on labor. It's similar to running a brick and mortar business, a coffee shop, let's just say. You need a facilitator, a person there to serve, make someone coffee, to take the payment. So it's very labor heavy. And I've worked with brick and mortar businesses, and I've seen the stress that people have gone through, where it's consistent changing of personnel. It's, I need to get this person's unreliable, and they're just going through this vicarious cycle. And that's one of the biggest limitations as to why certain businesses can't scale past certain parts. I'd say a typical brick and mortar business in London probably gets stuck at around the 20 to 30, 40K mark, because the lack of scalability. They serve a local area, they trade within certain hours, they rely on humans, their margins are at a certain level just because of the limitations there. But then when you go above that, you've got capital, which psychology and money epitomizes. And exactly to what you said, it's if you make a pound, do not spend 99p and then you've got a penny left. It's preserve, distribute your money into wealth building assets like the S&P 500 is the basic dollar cost average every single month. But then on top of that, you've got content, and then the top of that pyramid, code, which I think is a big component of a lot of businesses. And I think just one thing that you mentioned there, code. Are you looking to build your own code, or are you looking to work with someone who has code or white label something?
I think it's a really good question. I think it comes down to specialization, and just down to basic economics, which is you can't do everything. I think having an understanding of code is interesting and important, but right now I'm enjoying more working in the sell side, so in the kind of marketing, personal brand side. I think I really like the way that some people I've worked with start implementing software and systems into their business. But for me, I see that as an outsourceable task, and I am happy to commit myself to learning every single thing that I can about building a personal brand and generating leads and generating trust and authority, and leave the coding to someone else who's done it for 10 years.
Yeah, I think the place that we're in today, there's so much code that you can implement into the back end of your business that essentially makes your business a tech-enabled business and is ahead of 97% of businesses out there, because there's so many people who just don't even, if you think about how many people have adopted OpenAI, ChatGPT, I reckon there's probably only 10, 15%, probably not even that, of the global population. I saw a stat that only 6.7% of the global population have actually invested into crypto, which
Yeah.
is a lot, but it's a little at the same time. And when you think of, if that number was to double in the next 10 years, then to an extent, the market cap of crypto would double just naturally by just linear progression. And I think what you're doing is amazing. And I think it's the exact process that I'm following, that leave the specialties to the specialists and pull it in where you can, because there's a lot of people that you can go to. You use ManyChat in your business, as do I. But that's essentially tech within your business that makes it more leveraged, more valuable than it was before. So given what you've said, I know you mentioned your goals for 2025, which we'll keep between you and I because they're great. What is the vision that you see for the coaching side of things over the next 12 months? How do you want that community to look? Because I think it's really cool what you're doing on school.
I appreciate it. I think it comes down to my fundamental belief that I think everyone should try and own their own business, and everyone should be in charge of their own destiny. And I know that's never going to happen, but I believe that the more people that I can get who into that space, the better. And I've started off with a vehicle that I believe that people can use a personal brand to start that. But so I'm currently now, as I said, teaching people how to build their personal brand to then start their own business. But I want to make that even bigger and basically get people out of jobs that they don't like into jobs that they do like, and teach them how to build an offer using a skill set or a knowledge base that they have. And I spend most of my days sitting on calls now with people who are like, I'm in a job that I don't like, but I've got this thing that I've always wanted to do. And my vision is to turn that free thinkers community into a space where people can join. And then when they, have spent a decent amount of time in it, they've acquired enough knowledge to be able to leave and do their own thing. And that's my vision for it. It's starting with me helping with personal branding, but I'm now moving into building people's offers out, talking to them about outbound lead generation, talking to them about, how to sell to their clients, how to do delivery, the whole board. And I want to be the person that helps people, live a life that they really want and not be stuck in a job that doesn't fulfill them.
And where do you think that passion comes from?
I think the passion comes from two things: is my own personal story, actually just seeing me as a person being stuck in a job that didn't use my talents, didn't make me happy, didn't benefit the world in any way. So that's the first one. And then the second one comes from seeing what I like to call the middle class unhappiness trap in the UK, which is this idea of region beta and the region beta paradox. I'm sure you're familiar, but I believe that so many people in the UK live between a 6 or 7 out of 10 in life satisfaction. And because they're not willing to go down to a 5 to get to a 10, they exist within 6 and 7 and they don't leave. And I've seen too many of my friends, too many people I know, too many people who are 50 and 60 who just exist in this 5 or 6. And I want to help as many people get out of that. And I'm sick of seeing people thinking that is what life is, because like to live at a 6 and a 7 or a 5, 6 and a 7 for the rest of your life is like pretty depressing to me.
Yeah, I think we think on the same wavelength, and the region beta paradox is a concept that I've used multiple times and told that to many friends, and it's probably my favorite concept out there. And I continuously go to that as an axis point of when things get shit, when life is challenging, that generally when things are really bad or when they get tough, it's a case of it gives you enough compass to regroup and say, actually, there's a change that needs to happen here, and enough is enough. And for you, I heard you say that you dreamt of your dream corporate job in consulting. You got in there the first day you was there, and everyone was just talking about their holidays. So you were in that role for 2 years.
Well, I was in that role for just under a year, and then I did a very similar roles for a year before.
And when did you really start to get the wheels in motion to think of the exit strategy?
If I'm honest, I was one foot out the door before I even arrived. I was sitting in Bali and was starting my own business, and I was loving life. And I got on a plane back to London to start that job. And I told myself that I was going to give it a go because I knew I'd regret it because of how much I'd tried to get it. But from the first second I was there, I knew that I wouldn't be there long, and it was me simply just proving to myself that what I really wanted to do was actually what I wanted to do. And it took me 3 months of being there until I was like, okay, maybe even less. It took me a month and a half of being there to be like, 100%, this is not what I want to do. And everything I do from this day forward is going to be to try and make sure that when I leave, I have something to do. So yeah, it didn't take me long at all.
That's really cool. What advice would you give to 20-year-old Sol?
To think a bit more about what you're actually good at, and to not follow the crowd into what you think you should be doing and what you think you should be good at. And I can expand on that if you want.
Yeah, please do. How do you know? What if you're a 20-year-old out there who's like quite low in confidence? You think you're not good at anything.
So everyone is good at something.
Agreed.
And they just don't know. They haven't realized it yet, and they might need a push in the right direction. But everyone is good at something, and everyone enjoys something more than the average person. And a few ways that I think you could bring that out is think about what you did as a child. What did you do when you were bored and you didn't have anything to do? And what do you get micro compliments about? Like not people just like glazing you with praise, but what do people just say like, oh, I don't know, someone could be like, just say a funny joke. And it's like, oh, if someone says like, someone compliments you about being quite funny, well then why would you not turn that into some sort of career? And there's so many micro examples of that. And I think if you look deep enough, you can find things that you're good at and things that you enjoy. And I think it takes time and it's hard, and someone might be listening to this and thinking, I'm not good at anything, but you are averagely better than a lot of people at a lot of things. And it's just your decision where you wanna go with that.
Absolutely. And I think people can find themselves, they pigeonhole themselves so much and probably one of the best things that I love about business and entrepreneurship is it feels so exploratory that one day you can have a piece of pen and paper, you're just writing something down and you just test. And one of the best quotes I heard from a very successful entrepreneur is that everyone is making it up. You're figuring out what works for you, and then eventually you reflect when even now, and you look at yourself and think, what would I tell a 20-year-old Sol, which is only 4 or 5 years ago, but you're looking at him thinking, that's the advice I'd give to him then. So how do I take that axis and actually use it for now? Because I always think, and why I always find that question interesting in people's response is that it's what they would say to their younger selves, but most of what they say is applicable to exactly what they can do now. So why not just do what you're telling your younger self to do? And that, for me, comes slightly down to Solomon's paradox, which suggests that people are far better at giving advice and feedback on other people's problems and diagnoses. But when it comes down to themselves, they sell themselves on the why traps of, this is why I can't do it, therefore, and then they go on into whatever tangent. So I think that's really cool advice. So I guess moving into 2025, is there any bits of advice that you're trying to take or reflection points you're taking from this year that you really want to work on next year?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think one of them is what we've covered already, which is making sure that I mean, we spoke about this in the chat before, but is making sure to enjoy every moment of the process, because it's very easy in the entrepreneurship world, more than the corporate world, to get caught up in the okay, but just let me get to this point. And once I get to this much money and once my business is doing this, and one of my friends told me that it's very important and the best time in entrepreneurship is when you're at that growth stage because it's exciting, things are happening. And I'm really conscious to make sure that I enjoy every moment of that. And then the other part, which is interesting because it kind of goes against a lot of what I maybe preach about online, is that I am trying to have a more rounded life. I think with working a corporate job and also trying to build a side hustle, and the corporate job being 60, 70 hours a week itself, I just sacrificed a lot of my relationships. I didn't spend enough time in really prioritizing a lot of other life things. I kept my fitness up, but I sacrificed friendships and relationships and became a bit too business focused. And I want to make sure that, when I land in Bali in January, that I really do take time to enjoy life as well as enjoy business. And I want to make sure that I don't get to the end of 2025 and think, okay, well, 2026 is the year that I can enjoy life, because I think it's important to give yourself time to sit back and relax and actually enjoy this crazy world and everything it has to offer.
What does an ideal week look like to you? In Bali, let's add that on.
Yeah, I love that. Well, again, it's a crazy sentence that you even saying that to me, considering what I would have sold myself 6 months ago, right? But for me, it looks like exercise every morning. It looks like working every day because it's what I want to do. But it involves creating connections every single day. So I don't really think of weekdays being different. I live my Monday to Sunday in the exact same way. I think it's more sustainable to build repeatable systems in a day that last 365 days a year. And that would involve getting up, working in the morning, doing exercising, then working, then having lunch with a friend, connecting and doing some coaching, getting a bit more deep work in the afternoon, and then spending the evening with my laptop in a cool cafe or cool bar, and finishing off a bit of work with maybe a catch up with a friend in the evening. That would be my day. And if I could do that 365 of the day, if I could do that 365 days of the year, I'd be a very happy man.
Sounds like we have very similar mindsets, and I would say I had the perfect day yesterday to that point. It was a Sunday. I ended up smashing out about 6-7 hours worth of work, went to the gym afterwards, read. I was like, that for me is a perfect day. Maybe you have to sprinkle a bit of football in there, but yeah, that for me is just, it feels purposeful. And I always think that for me, when you're in, and I really think business comes in seasons, and I've had periods and seasons in business, and I think every entrepreneur eventually has this, is you have periods where you're like, no, I don't want to do this anymore. And just things trigger you. It's like, it's unexplainable, but you're in this point where just small things that would never roll you up just triggering you, like, nah, don't like that. Or someone says something and you just get triggered. It's just like, it's the time of the month, so to speak. And you go through these seasons, and I think it's understanding that you need winter in order to appreciate summer. Because if we had summer all year long, and you mentioned this about Dubai, I don't know if I could raise a family in Dubai, maybe just because the culture is very hot in the summer, but it's a case of the more you have of something that's too good, you don't appreciate the grind. And a couple of months ago, I was flying out to Germany. I'm an idiot when it comes down to flight at times, but I missed my flight, and I was at Heathrow, and instead of actually going back home, I just said, I'm going to sleep in the airport for the night. And I spoke to my mate, and he was like, mate, you're an idiot. What are you doing? Just go back home. And I just said, no, I want to sleep in the airport because I know tomorrow night I'm going to appreciate everything way more. And as well, the opportunity cost of taking the train to and from the airport today, I can just sit in the Cafe Nero, work, just crack on with stuff. And I think it's always looking at stuff as the opportunity and seeing what you can make of stuff. And I kind of reveled in the chance of being able to just sit there uninterrupted, walk around the airport, work, go sleep, wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning and just go for it.
I love that. And to me, that's such a beautiful mindset to have, because to see things as an opportunity and to see the glass half full in everything you can is such a great way to live life. And I think there's too many people who fall victim to wanting to complain and would see that missed flight and see that as an issue. And it's like seeing the beauty in that and seeing the opportunity that is such a cheat code to just like be happy every day.
And I think that the thing that I've really tried to retrain my brain on is perspective. And I tried to take this from this. This is probably my biggest role model and inspiration is Jocko Willink. Are you familiar with Jocko? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It is just looking at everything that happens as much as you can and just say, "Good, you've missed a flight. Good, you've got." And I even said this in 2023 when I mentioned I had a really serious back injury, and that like probably the closest I've been to depression. But I was able to build my coaching business because I physically wasn't able to exercise the way I wanted apart from walking. I ended up averaging probably 25,000 steps every day for a good 6-7 month period because that was the only thing I could do. But then in that time, I built more business connections, more relationships, and I got to build a coaching business that I feel really, really purposeful and passionate about. And if that moment didn't happen, then it probably wouldn't have happened. But equally, we can't split test life. And I really, touch wood, wish that that back injury doesn't happen again. But it just gives you a newfound perspective on things. I'm curious. Sorry, after you.
I was just going to say, like, even before the question, I think that makes you indestructible. Like, it genuinely makes you, like, you can have anything happen to you and you can see the positives. It's like nothing bad can happen to you. The worst thing can happen to you, aside from death, maybe. You can see the positives in everything. And I think it's amazing.
But even to what you said about death. So Jocko mentioned his best friend died, and this was the only time he ever missed an episode of the Jocko podcast. I can't remember whose friend was. I don't want to misquote who it was, but his friend died, and he made a pact with his friend that whoever died first, if any of us died while we were serving, that we would fly out and we would be there for the other one's mother. So instantly, when his friend died, he flew out, was there with his friend's mother for a week, just unconditionally, and missed his podcast. But he said to himself, nothing is going to take precedence over this podcast except these criteria. But then he sat and thought to himself, my friend's dead. How do I find good in this? And he found good in this, in the memories that this person shared and the life they commemorated and how they inspired people. And I'm very, very fortunate. Again, touch wood, I haven't had anyone really, really close to me die yet, but it's inevitable. And it's one of those things that you can never brace yourself for it. And I'm sure you've probably seen people go through that trauma before, as have I, and it's really saddening. And I try to think at times that these one of those thoughts that I think to myself, how will I see the good when X happens?
Spot on. I think that's exactly, you can train your mind just like in gratitude, you can train your mind just in motivation to see that. And then it's so enlightening now. And I think I even piss my friends off quite a lot because like we'll have the worst things happen to us. Like we'll have like arguments will even start because like a bad thing will happen. I'll just be like, okay, it's just not like, it's not that deep. We'll get around it. And it's so freeing once you get that. Whereas you walk around and people look like they've got the weight of the world on their shoulders because they're seeing the negative in everything that's happening to them, like day in, day out.
So how do you think you trained yourself on that?
I think it's just like going to the gym, mate. I think it's like, it's a case of just saying like, okay, a bad thing has happened to me. I now have a choice. I can either choose to be annoyed or I can choose to not be annoyed. And therefore, when you choose to not be annoyed and you see the positives, you're training your muscle, just like the way you can, there's scientific evidence that say you can train yourself for your brain to be more grateful. I think it works in a very similar way to seeing the positive in things. And now I can say 100% after doing it for maybe a year, it just comes naturally to me. And I tell you, the first time I realized it came naturally to me is me and my friend were driving around Australia, and we're both pretty skint. We had no money. We had to meet rent, and we're in the sticks. And like, I'm sure a lot of people listening can relate to that. And I was like, we had no way of money coming in, and we were just driving.
Whereabouts in Australia were you?
In Byron Bay.
Okay.
And it was like, for those who know where Byron Bay is and like what it looks like, it's just the most beautiful place ever.
So picturesque.
Just actually mental. And I just said to him, like, mate, look around us. It's one of the most beautiful sunsets I've ever seen in my life. We're sat in Byron Bay, like we have no responsibilities. We will make something work, and like, let's just be grateful for where we are now, because we could spend the next 2 weeks worrying about money, but like, it will come. And like, that was the first time that I was like, okay, like, not to be arrogant about it, but I managed to work out a way to see the good and be positive about things. And yeah, as I said, so freeing.
And I love that reframe. And I was speaking to my jiu-jitsu coach a couple months ago, and there was a problem that arose, and he just said, he's just mopping the mats. And what I love about martial arts is the black belt, the coach, is mopping the mats, and I try to use that in business and life, and I always try to jump in, mop the mats, because it's no one's better than any job, or the worst job in the gym, especially the coach. But he said, and he was just mopping the mats, and it's like it feels like he's a modern day philosopher. Martin, big shout out to Martin, but he's just there, and he talks about this problem. He's like, it's just like jiu-jitsu. It's like, we just have to find a solution to the problem. That's it. And he just continues, and I was just there stretching, like, yeah, you're right. Literally everything in life is pretty much a problem. And I don't play chess, but it's are you a chess player?
Not avidly.
You give me the aura as though you could be a chess player. That's
I'll take that as a compliment.
Definitely. But I was like, and he loves chess, and I just thought, that's it. And they call jiu-jitsu human chess, but he's there and he's looking at all these things, and he's like, just got to figure out the problem to it. And I think if more people can adopt that process, or that thinking thought of, what do I do here? How do I fix it? Then we'd just be so much better.
Yeah, probably. I mean, it's not like, we all know those people who are just problem people. And I think it's a regular saying that I find myself like thinking or saying to people is like, well, what's the solution? How are we gonna come up with something? And I think, like, I'm not to say that I'm like some role model, but I think if more people can have what we're talking about is just thinking about what your jiu-jitsu coach said, which is like, life is just about solutions, then we'd all be much, much happier and get a lot more things out of life than we are currently.
Definitely. So I'm intrigued. You used to play rugby at uni, right? Mm-hmm. What does your training look like right now?
Training for me is now massively transitioned away from like your rugby lifting into just trying to be as functional as possible. I want to like create a body that like moves well, that is in like, that moves well, is functional. So for me, it's just important for me to be able to feel like every day, like I feel free in my body. So I'm doing a lot more running than I used to. And then just kind of functional training, functional movements, and then a bit of yoga and stretching in between. And I found that as a three, that combination is pretty unbeatable for me.
Yeah, because anyway, I think,
as we say, for me.
Yeah, no, definitely. I really think the if you just do running alone without stretching, you're just going to kill your body eventually, because it just gets so tight, and the lack of pliability in your body is just dwarfed. And one thing and I was training with my friend here in Colombia, and I was stretching. He's like, mate, what are you doing? And I was like, no, I really need to stretch now with my body, because I know that if I don't warm up properly, the risk of me injuring my back is just so high that to take 10 to 15 minutes just to loosen up, just essentially lubricate the joint, so to speak, makes such a big difference. And I guess that's the wisdom as you get older, that you realize that you want this functional body, that you want to be able to move properly, and then instead of just doing these heavy direct compound lifts that just make you feel like a brick, it doesn't really work. Yeah, and again, each to their own. Some people absolutely love it and they want their body for certain purposes, but other people look at other things. Are there any sports or things that you're looking at next year? High rocks, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a classic guy in their 20s in London who's kind of doing the inevitable running. I'll probably get into high rocks. I'll probably start cycling at some point. I'll probably like looking to do an Ironman. I feels almost inevitable. One thing I really like, I really believe that it's important to do sports that involve 360 movement. So obviously rugby being that. And I love playing paddle as well because it involves like using your senses and
It's
yeah, so
so fun.
I played. It's so good, right? I played a lot of paddle out
It
in
feels
Bali, and
addictive. I've only played twice, but it just feels like, oh, yeah.
mate, it's unreal. And like that to be, I used to play quite a lot of squash when I was growing up as well. So I need to have a competitive aspect, which is not just like physical competition. I want a bit of skill involved. So yeah, I'm doing a lot of paddle. We'll probably end up doing. I've done a few like a marathon, and I'll probably end up just doing a few of them. But yeah, keeping up because some competitive sport is important for me, and I love a bit of five-side football, so I'll definitely be joining my team back out in Bali in a few weeks' time.
Yeah, I think it's to what you're saying. If you're just going into the gym, you're tracking your numbers. It gets to a point where it's just boring. Personally, for
Yeah,
me, you're just looking at stuff and you're thinking, what is the purpose of this?
yeah,
Whereas it feels like you do all of this training in silence, in private, to then go out and then test yourself. And it's again, this is something that I heard. I use a lot of reframes from jiu-jitsu is that or MMA. You're not going out to fight that person. You're just testing your skill set. And if the other person is better than you, it just means your skill set is at X level. And that's why in a lot of sports you have amateur rankings, pro rankings, you have belts to grade people, and it shows people where they're at. And I really think it's cool when you turn around and you do a lot of work in the background, and then you go out and then, or you go back to the team in Bali and they're like, so, mate, like you've actually
yeah.
got a lot better, or like your fitness has gone up. Or equally, if you're watching more and more Spurs, then things might go down.
Yeah, it
I
depends
can't
where
speak
I'm.
right now, to be fair.
Yeah, I was
We're
going to
14th in the
say.
league.
Yeah, but I think we're both in. We can both laugh about football equally right now, but I 100% agree, mate. And I think as I always, I like the idea of coming back to like what we're meant to do as humans, and like it does make me think like, well, I was standing in the gym the other day and I looked around and I was like, it's so weird that there's just 100 humans just sitting in like a room, just like putting weight against themselves to push their muscles. And I was like, that's just so, it doesn't make any sense. Like, why are we doing this? And I always come back to that, like, yeah, it's important to do that, but in the context of like, why are we doing this to be fitter and stronger and do that? So if you're a big bulky guy who's not using it like to actually move and perform and all do that stuff, then you're just going against human nature, I think.
Are you familiar with a part of the brain known as the anterior mid-cingulate cortex?
I'm a big fan of Andrew Huberman, so yes, I listen to it a lot, 100%.
And when I came across what the study that he looked into, that was mind blowing for me. And one thing that I've really made sure of, and this is probably something that you've experienced yourself when you're traveling, is you lose the rhythm of training. And just before I left, I remember I felt my body, and I think I trained 11 days in a row, and I was like, oh, no, I'm not really tired. But then I said to myself, it was literally a whole day layover in Mexico. So I was like, okay, I know I'm not going to train in the airport. The best I'm going to do is be able to get 10,000 steps in, which I did. But I was like, okay, let me just basically blow my body out now, and then I know I'm going to break that day up, and then I might miss the next day of training just based on how I felt. But straight away got back into it. Joe Rogan spoke about it. He recommends that whenever you get off the plane, exercise as quickly as possible. But I think I got into Colombia I got to my friend's place at 2 o'clock in the morning, and then we were working out by 9 o'clock the next morning. But the point I'm making, as you probably know about the concept, is when you're doing harder things, so whether it's work, whether it's training, you're essentially just growing that part of the brain so it just feels easier. And you see these people who are just machines, quote unquote, who are just training every day, but it just becomes habitual. It becomes to most people like they're brushing their teeth, or they're just filling up a glass of water because it's what's needed. And I really think that if we relay this to business, because the same applies to work, but as you said, you treat a Monday to Sunday like it's the exact same. I think if people can engineer their lives in an environment to get themselves to that place, then everything becomes a lot easier. And I really try to talk about the concept of engineer the life that you want by putting the inputs in that you need. Because if you're not doing the right things, there's no way you're going to achieve your goals. What are the inputs that you have on a day-to-day basis that you keep as a non-negotiable when it comes down to work?
When it comes down to work, as in like what makes me better at work?
Yeah, and also, do you have any non-negotiables that you make sure you do on a day-to-day basis to achieve the goals you want to achieve?
Yeah, so 100% exercise in the morning, like that is first thing. Eat the frog, get my exercise out of the way, like has been a game changer for me. And very like maybe 2 or 3 days in the last 4 or 5 months have I like not done that. So that's really important for me. And then apart from that, I think I'm a massive extrovert, and therefore I make sure that within my day I have human interaction, because if I'm down in like in my laptop the whole day, I feel so tired. Whereas like weirdly enough, after this podcast, we've been chatting for almost 2 hours, like I'm gonna sit there and feel more energized than I was before. So getting human contact into my day is super important. And then, yeah, I would say apart from that, like the only other point that I make sure that I get in my day is just like really structured, sensible deep work. Like I read Deep Work by Cal Newport, and that really helped me realize that like if I can get 4 hours of deep work in a day, my productivity is going to be so much different versus like work for 5 minutes, pick up my phone, work for 5 minutes. So yeah, they'd be the three things.
What's so ironic is a friend of mine, she recommended that book to me last week, and I subscribed to the app Everand. So I searched on Everand last night for it. Annoyingly, they don't have it, so I might look at seeing what other memberships I can get. But I had that on my reading list for yesterday, and if I could find it, then I would have read it, because I always think, for me, books are a real passion and something I would have never have said 7-8 years ago. But I always find, quite often, I find that books come to me at a certain place, and it feels like they're aligned to me at that point. But I think I love the structure of your day, and one thing I want to improve is kissing the frog, as you said. I think but then equally I look at myself and think I've leaned into training more so in the evening. So again, it's each their own. But I guess back when you were a uni lad and you're probably doing the Wednesday sports nights, you probably weren't hitting the gym in the morning. So how did you get the change from erratically training whenever to being quite religious with kissing the frog?
It's funny you say that, and like I'm probably not going to give a great answer, but because of the fact that I was very fortunate to play in the first team for the whole 3 years that I was there. So we actually did have very religious training. So we were Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturdays in the gym, and then Monday we were training like 15 times a week. It was kind of ridiculous. And we used to have Saturday morning gyms after a Friday night at uni. It was like a 7 a.m. gym session. So I've actually become very used to like waking up and just getting into the gym, no matter if I can see or not, basically.
So you just rolled out from the club and just...
Mate, there's some horrific, like some of the states that I entered that gym I'm not proud of. Yeah, absolute like hectic. But that's made me realise, because then after that you come back and you feel so much better. So that was a really good base for me. So unfortunately, yeah, I've always had a regimented routine, and I've actually found it harder to go from regimented rugby training to then not having someone telling you where you need to train. And that's been a really hard transition, because I had no free will, whereas I now have free will, and I need to build systems in place to make sure I get to the gym.
Have you got any crazy fun stories that you can share in this podcast, or are they too explicit?
It depends. It depends about where you're talking about, but I think some of the good stories in the gym involve just basically like going from kind of squat into the toilet to puke, back to squat, going into the toilet to puke. So yeah, nothing more specific than that that I can go into. But,
Yeah, we'll keep it offline. Don't worry. I love that. So we'll share all links afterwards. But where can people find you? And more importantly, what's next for you this year? What are you most excited about?
Yeah, great question. Thanks for saying. And yeah, so obviously my Instagram is at sol.hyde, and then my YouTube is just Sol Hyde. So you can find me yapping all things online business on there. And then in terms of what's next for me, like again, moving to Bali in 2 weeks, which I'm super excited about because that was a massive goal for me and feels like, again, something that I've hit, which I'm very grateful for. And then really looking just to grow my business. The exciting part about it is I just see such a stairway now to building it, and I want to reach more and more people. I want to keep putting out social media content that gives people value. I want to get 1,000 people in my free community, the Free Thinkers Club, and I want to help as many people as I can, either through the community or through the coaching program that I run, and that's really where my year is focused.
Amazing. Guys, I would really recommend you go check out Sol's content. He has got some of, and I'm not even saying this to blow smoke up your ass, but for someone who's kind of an independent creator, I think your content's some of the best out there. So good for you.
Appreciate that.
That's one. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe. Appreciate it.